Welcome to Literary Speak, a forum where readers and writers meet to promote the love of reading, writing, literacy, and the arts. I'm C. Deborah Thomas, your host for the next half hour. With me today is Margo Candela and Charles Chatmon. They will talk to us about the man's heart to the readers, and Margo will talk about the women's heart to the readers. Tell our audience about your work.
Well, I'll go first. I basically am writing women's commercial fiction with a main character that's a Latina, written through a Latina perspective. But I'm striving to reach a mainstream audience because I'm not only writing about Latinas. I think it's universal. I enjoy reading books by Indian American authors and European authors. It doesn't matter to me. It's the story that matters, and I am writing from a unique perspective as a woman, as a Latina. So that's my aim.
I'm glad you started out with that plug for reading and writing, because that's essentially what we're talking about here, encouraging our audience to read much more than they do, and the potential writers out there to get in on the act as well. Charles?
That's true. Well, I'm a published poet, and my poetry is from a man's heart. I write what a man feels and thinks, which is very rare in today's fiction and literary world. I write poems of love, and not just the typical mushy love poems. These are poems that have to do with breakups, poems that do with how a man truly feels about a woman, how a man truly feels about his place in society, and I try to cover all the bases with my work.
Very good. I met Charles a while back at one of the African American book events. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, right. And he has a completely different take on things. I mean, I was fascinated by the fact that he wrote poetry, which men don't tend to do, and then the tone of his poems as well. But also, he was a networker, a collaborator. He was helping people set up, and when you go to these book events, your bottom line is sales. And people don't often have time to kind of help each other out. He was doing the opposite. He was helping people set up and taking pictures for people and stuff like that. So tell us, I like the poem, The Observer. I really like that, and he's also a novelist, so we're going to talk about both things as well. Tell us about that poem, The Observer, because that was kind of how I saw you too. You were taking in people and seeing,
The Observer is from one of my books, The Depths of My Soul. It talks about how a man really looks on the outside. In fact, he is the main character in The Depths of My Soul. He just takes you to the depths of society and the depths of romance. What his role is just to observe life in the world around him, and I think in the poem he also describes about how he knows history and looks at all the different things that go on in history and how we as people have progressed for better or for worse. But the observer mainly just writes down on paper and pen and sees images and tries to relate to us about the stories that we all have in our lives and where we're going and how we can do better.
And in a way, that's what you do as well. You're an observer of women and their drama and how they interact and what they like. And
well, I mean, that's an important quality to have, and it's a very rare one to have. I mean, he mentioned love. He's single, ladies. It's very sweet. But it is basically what you do is you look and you watch and you listen, and I think that's why people kind of are drawn to you, because you do listen to them, and you are more receptive to what they're saying, and you're always kind of watching, because you never know where inspiration is going to come. Exactly. It can come in the weirdest places. I was once driving by a woman, and she was in her house coat, smoking a cigarette, and she was watering the driest lawn ever. And I was like, what kind of life is that? So little things like that kind of wake, you want to explore. Use your imagination to explore somebody else's life, and you have to be very open to that. You can't close yourself off.
That is definitely true. I wrote a poem once about this woman who, imperfections. I saw this woman who had a beard, and she was going bald, and I thought, that's a woman. And it was the most amazing thing to me, and it set me to exploring those imperfections that we all have, especially as we grow older. And what do we do with them? Do we do surgery, or do we just accept them and say, you know what, this is an interesting life. The wrinkles and everything is just great. This part gives me character. So you both do that, and poets do it as well in your writing. You mentioned something about you primarily Latino perspective, but you want to broaden your base somewhat. Do you think that some of the issues that you deal with, they have crossover effect? They speak to the heart of an African American woman, an Asian American woman?
I think they do. I think everyone has problems with their families. You know, they're a blessing and a curse at the same time. And I think anyone can kind of relate to trying to find your own identity and still maintain the very important ties of your family. And it's a balance and a struggle, and especially if you decide to go a different route. And I think, you know, as generations progress, I'm a first generation Mexican American, and my parents are from Mexico, and first in my family to go to college. So, you know, I'm doing a lot of new things that they don't necessarily understand all the time. Like I remember at one point during the whole .com thing, I had a job every 6 months, and my father sat me down and he said, I worked my job from 1971 until 1990, until they told me it was time for me to go. And I said, well, that's not the kind of life I want. And it's hard to make them understand, and sometimes you have to take risks, and sometimes you have to stir the pot a little bit and be the outspoken one. And I think that's the only reason we've gotten to where we want to, because you have to take the chance. And
You too. Absolutely, Charles.
Yeah, you do have to take a chance and be outspoken, because, you know, no one else will say, or unless you take that responsibility of being a poet or being a writer like yourself, to ask the right questions. How are we going to really make society grow? How are we going to make it progress to where it's better for all of us? So I think when we do literature, on our field of literature, we ask the questions that would need to be asked when no one else will, you know, do the same for us. So we have to do that. Exactly.
And you know, most writers don't make a lot of money. They're not the authors of Harry Potter and all the other, you know.
I made some money last night because I bought the book. So
you help the whole process. So I understand where it's difficult for our families to understand, well, how much money did you make again? How many books did you sell when you went to this event? And exactly. And we have to tell them that with a solid base. We have to tell them that with the sincerity that I'm not making a lot of money now, but my hope is that down the road I will. And you know.
Well, I mean, I think our families acknowledge that it is a huge risk that you're taking. You're making a tremendous investment. You're putting a lot of things on the line. You know, your relationship with your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or whatever. To say I'm taking a huge risk and I don't know what's going to come of it. And I think when I finally did, you know, get the phone call, it was more relief than anything. Like, oh God, now it was relief, and I know my family was relieved because you know my husband has shouldered a lot of the financial burden, and that's hard, you know, to kind of give up that kind of control over your money for you know, shampoo. You know, somebody else knows what kind of shampoo you're buying. So I think for everyone it was like, okay, now, you know, it's a legitimate pursuit. It's not a little hobby, you know.
From the first time when you have that published book in your hands, you know you made it. You're a success. That's only one part. Like Margo said, you need to support your family, your friends, people around you, and I'm so glad around my support system, my family, and my associates, especially in the literary community, who've also been very supportive, who also helped push along. And like you said earlier, the networking. The networking is so key for authors, because we have a lot of new authors published every year, and they need experienced writers like us to help them come along. So like Margo says, we have that one component of our family, but I think in the literary community, you need so much more, especially from your own peers, to really be successful.
Exactly. And you have an organization called the
California Writers Collective, for one.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the California Writers Collective started 2 years ago with authors from Northern California and Southern California. We get together usually around summer of every year. We have free writers workshops. We did one recently. Very free. So free, you can just bring them paper, pen, and just write everything down. And we also get together like recent events. Like we did the recent Lamert Park Book Fair together. We all shared our same table, and we all support each other. And not only that, but again, the networking aspect of it. We go around to different authors, and we ask about the books, and we also have the cards, materials, and help get the word out selling their books. So it's a very important networking group that we have, and we'd like to keep keep it going.
Yeah, that's so important. I remember going to a book event, and it was at the flea market in Pasadena. The authors are here. Charles was also part of that. And this one author came, and she couldn't stay very long, but she went around and she bought a book from each of us. And I thought, and for some of us, that was the only book that we sold that day. So that network is so important to the source of encouragement and support from your family and friends. Your husband's been shouldering the financial aspect of it and probably taking care of your son as well.
No. There's only so much I can expect.
But we do need that network. We really do, because until we get to the point where we can pay people to do this stuff, it's our family and friends. So tell me a little bit about your project, which is coming up. It's going to be out in the fall.
I have a new book out in October. It's called Life Over Easy. And it's actually the book I started before I wrote Underneath It All. And I kind of set it aside because my mother-in-law, she was taking a hypnosis course. She became a certified hypnotherapist, and she said, I need to practice. Can I practice on you? And she practiced on me, and that was on a Sunday. And on the next Monday, I started to write Underneath It All. So I said, okay, this is a story that needs to get done, and got published first, and then I was able to go back and finish Life Over Easy. And it's basically about a woman who has to reevaluate her life after her boyfriend dumps her, and she has to think, well, is this the end of the world, or is it the beginning of something else? And since I'm not a romantic person, unlike Charles, I can't do love stories. It's funny, and it deals with expectations of yourself and what your family expects from you, and it's an adventure, for me to kind of explore somebody kind of developing and making choices, and sometimes making the worst choices she can, because that's fun,
Yeah, fun.
Well, I'm in the middle of certain projects right now. My third book of poetry, Poems from a Man's Heart, should be out later in 2007. That's my third volume of poetry. I like to tie everything together. And I just finished recently an anthology of short stories and novellas I wrote back in high school and college.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little love stories in it too, but also comedy, action, adventure, a little bit of everything that I'm sure that the readers will love to enjoy. But blocking all that is an event I'm very glad in hosting, the Los Angeles Black Book Expo. I'm now the executive director of the event, and it really is a way for African American literature to be in the forefront of the city. There are not too many African American book events or really ethnic events for authors in the city. So when I was given this opportunity last year, I jumped at it right away because I knew how important it was. The Murray Park Book Fair was a very successful event, and it's part of our Summer of Literacy, so we'd like to continue in that same vein. And if people go to labbx.com, LABB as in boy, and x.com, they'll be able to see the past two expos, plus see what we have planned for this year too.
Okay, very interesting. Which brings me to another point, that of organizations that you belong to that support what you do.
Well, right now I'm an organization of one. I've really gone solo. I've relied on the support of my friends who are writers, my family, my editor, Sulai Hernandez, who is now with Simon & Schuster. She was just the driving force about, I say, I might have written the book, but she really took it from there. It became her passion, and I think in the end she loved it more than I did. I was ready to kind of move on, and she's like, no, this is the book, this is my baby. But you have to, I feel that just like Charles, I don't do nearly as much as Charles does. I mean, this man is like working a job and a half. But I thought it was very important for me. As soon as I got published, I started calling my junior high and my local libraries where I was as a kid, where I went, and I said, I will come to speak for free, because I know that if somebody would have offered me an encouraging word or showed me that there was a possibility that I could have done something differently, I would have gotten to where I am maybe a little sooner. So I'm speaking at the Cypress Park Library. That's where I got my first library card on August 29th, and giving a free talk on how to get published.
Oh wow, that's an important
that's
topic.
great.
I actually saw you at an event in Culver City with Bernadine Coleman. She's also part of a group, Writers Corner, that I belong to as well. So the networking aspect of it, belonging to a group that supports writing, is very powerful.
Well, I mean, you never know, because if I wouldn't have done that thing, I wouldn't have met you.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's easy to stay home. It's very easy to stay home. But, it's important to take the resources and what we've learned and share it with other people.
That is important. That's what we're
Yeah,
about.
it's funny that you mentioned the Writers Corner, because when I was starting out in the business 5 years ago, I was one of the organizations that I immediately started to bond with, and the great people that were part of that, such as yourself and so many other great writers, that helped me, encouraged me as a young writer to go forth and do the things I'm doing now. And I guess that's part of the reason why I am doing most of the book event or coordinating with our writers group around the state, is because of organizations like the Writers Corner and other organizations that are around the state that are doing great things for our young people. And of course, we need to pass that part to the young people. I think we have the love of literature for our young people, the love of writing, the love of reading, because they're so distracted with so many things that if we give them alternatives in the literary sense, then we can definitely make an impact. But until that happens, we can't we can't really make the impact that we like to do. So we would like to, as of course Writers Corner, the California Writers Collective, and of course sponsoring our book events together, we can bring the joy of literature back, and what she's doing too, bring it right back, and we have the love.
Exactly. That's part of the writer's legacy, and I think that maybe writers don't necessarily think about it, but in this day and age when books are so challenged by all the other things that happen out there, when I was growing up, I read incessantly because there was nothing else to do. Now there's TV, there's music, there's so many different media. It's threatening to push the book out of the scene, and we can't allow that to happen. So our legacy is we have to write.
Yeah, exactly.
What authors do you read? Because I think that writers ought to be readers.
Well, I grew up reading the greats, Shakespeare, Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, so many great authors and writers from all spectrums, all genres, because if you want to be in this business a long time, you have to learn from those greats and really not understand their work, but really kind of get a sense of what they're writing about, and kind of adopting your style a little bit to what they did, some of the techniques that they use. So for me, I've always been a fan of literature. I was a library kid. I spent hours in the library. Some more so they had to kick me out of one. So yeah, the love of literature has always been there for me.
Yeah. That's powerful, because when I was growing up, I had this, I read all the kids' stuff. I had this librarian who was very set in her ways. You just read the kids' stuff. I finished reading all the kids' stuff, and I snuck over to the big people stuff, and she would come and, but I just needed to read. Reading was like my life, and that's the kind of thing that I want to promote to our young people, our audience, actually, because it's never too late to begin reading, I don't think.
No, it's a time that you take for yourself, and you say, instead of doing something else that passively entertains me, I'm going to sit and be quiet and indulge my imagination. And I think that's very important. I think it is a sad thing that people don't do it. They want it kind of hand-fed to them. They want it, the short, punchy kind of stuff. And it's our responsibility, as writers, to say it is worth your time to read, and if it's not, then we have no career or job.
We can't allow that to happen, can we? Yeah. And we see that the Harry Potter, thankfully, that's bringing back reading and interest in reading, and hopefully that some of that will transfer to the rest of us, because this is the last in the series, and so.
And I am upset.
So some of that could be sort of rub off on us, because we do write good books. Your book is very good. Talk to us about this one in particular.
The second book? Well, the second one I actually enjoyed writing on, because it had to do with food and family, and religion, and I kind of treat it I'm a sarcastic person, I'm not mushy, and I got to kind of experience, how does food bring us together? And basically, this woman, her name is Natalia Campos, she is cooking for people because that's how she expresses her love. But her family sees her as because she's a caterer, her family sees her as a spinster who cooks for strangers. You know, so it never kind of, yeah, and it doesn't translate. And it's basic her using food to kind of say, I relate to you through food, and this is my food, and I give it to you. And I may feed strangers, but you know, when you come together, like with a book, it's an intimate kind of thing. And I always do equate cooking and eating with reading and writing because it is something that you want to share with other people.
It is. It is.
Well, with the Voices of South Central, my second book, I wanted to paint a picture of this entire community, not just one segment of the community. You know, growing up there in the late 1980s, we had the major TV stations like from NBC to ABC, and come with their experts, and they have these forums talking about the problems in the community. Well, I'm from the community, so I might as well write something that I know is
authentic.
Yeah, authentic. So I wrote that, and a group of poems based on the community called the South Central Poems. So I wrote poems which about positive and negative in the community. Of course, you have to write both sides of that.
Of course.
But you try not to present the community just one way. But also love poems, encouragement poems I wrote in my years in college. And at the very end, an article I wrote back when I was attending Cal State LA that kind of life goes on South Central, now South LA, that you kind of, that you really can just look at and just see that this is a community that is just like any other community, except we're just faced with some more challenges on our side. And really we're just, again, the human aspect of it. We're just human like everybody else, but again, we just live in this community, but we're trying to do the best we can. So that was my response.
There are people there who do 9 to 5 just like the rest of the Southern California, and it's important to present that point of view. Since your writing is sort of the heart of a man to other men and to women as well, and yours is the heart of a woman to women. How do you step out of that woman's category or that man's category? Because people do tend to label and say, oh, he writes about men's stuff and he writes about love, and they'll just, you know, how do you get out of that box?
I think you have to be very careful because you can write yourself into a corner and you can label yourself and market yourself to the point where editors won't let you break out of that box. And I know I'm currently finishing my third novel, and I know what my fourth is going to be written in a first-person male perspective. And my editor is like, well, we got to write to the ovaries, right? And I said, you know, I think it's funny, and I think it can work, and I think I can do it. And if you're not going to publish it, I can go somewhere else. And you kind of have to say, this is what I want to do, this is my career. And I got the first book out of my system underneath it all, was very based in my experience and fictionalized because it's more interesting than my life, hopefully. But it was based in like my struggle to break away from my family and still appreciate them for with all their flaws and everything, appreciate them for how they do express themselves, you know. But I said, you know, I'm ready to kind of move on, and you know, I am a Latina writer. I'm very proud of that, and it's colored my life and it colors my writing. But there's so much more. I have a wider perspective now, so it is a struggle.
Yeah, and with the Voices of South Central, I tried to stay not just merely into the romantic type of love poetry, but on the second side of the depths of my soul, there's also the depths of society, which I talk about deep issues or social issues of the day. But the Voices of South Central, you try to cover all of the spectrum. Would you try to cover love, the community, encouragement, and then my third book of poetry, the Poems from the Heart of a Man, or Poetry from the Heart, it talks about the love and of course the community, but I try to bring everything together. Right now with the fourth book of the anthology, merely just short stories I wrote, but again, the different genres, and you have to, like Margo was saying, you have to get outside the box a little bit because your publisher will definitely put you in a pigeonhole and say, well, we want to market to this group, we want to market to that. But you, as a writer, you have to grow, you have to expand your genres because, again, you get into that box and people will only expect you to write that one particular genre or that one particular subject, where Ms. Rowling now finds herself being the Harry Potter writer because she wrote Harry Potter. We don't know.
She may have a whole lot of them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a very powerful point to make because, you know, I always saw myself as a poet, and that's why I feel intimidated about writing a novel, although it is on my list of things to do. But I feel intimidated by the process, and family and friends have said, well, when are you going to write the novel? We've had the poems, now where's the novel? I have the wisdoms, where's the novel? And I keep hearing that. So, but that's because I've pigeonholed myself, and I think it's a good thing maybe to have that label as well, because then you become the expert, and that's not so bad, is it?
No, it's not. It's not bad at all. Except if you feel like you're being suffocated. It's hard, and you want to break out, and they want the same thing over and over again. And, it's like it's so easy to write a book of poetry. Yes, now I'll write a novel. People don't respect the fact that you do have to switch mindsets, and sometimes you're not ready to make that leap. You know what you want, and some people. I know one writer who's written one book, and that's going to be the rest of her life. She's going to be flogging that book until she can't pull up her pantyhose anymore. That's what she wants to do. She doesn't want to write another book.
There's not another book, and that's okay too. We have to be able to feel that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And with the poetry of a man's heart, I've been pigeonholed by men who said, you're soft, or you're not this or that. When actually I kind of write poems that relate to how a man feels towards a woman that
they just don't say it themselves.
They just don't say it. They don't say it themselves. So you have to be a little careful with that, because people start looking at you. I thought you were a man, because they think that the poems are part of your personality. They can't separate the poems from the personality. And then they think like, well, I thought you was a romantic guy. I said, well, I am, but
you're multidimensional. You're all of those things. Yeah.
And he's single.
Yes. Tell us anything that you need to talk to the readers, anything that you want to leave with our readers, any skills, encourage the people out there who want to write poets or novels. What do you have to say to them that got you going, keeps you going, both of you?
Well, I think for me it was, if I don't do it, then no one else is going to do it. No one's going to do it for me. And I made the decision to take a huge risk, and it's a daily risk, because you never know when you sit at your desk if anything's going to come. If you're just going to wind up sitting there, then you have to account for your day. It's like, what'd you do today?
Exactly.
Well, see that wall? I stared at it for 8 hours, and it's I need to paint it. Yeah. So it's basically, you need to make the decision and take the responsibility for whatever you do. If it's writing a book or getting a new job, it's really up to you. You can't blame anybody else for not getting it done.
Yeah, that's true, because you have to take the initiative as a writer. I was glad that I started very young, back in junior high, to write my own stories. It was just something to pass the time. It was a hobby, and then that hobby grew to something I want to do for the rest of my life. So as a writer, and as a poet, you do take the initiative to create your own works, because let's face it, there's a lot of bad movies, there's a lot of bad media today, that you when you create a story or you create a poem, you feel good because it belongs to you. It's something that you wrote that no one else can touch. Or they can criticize, but no one else can touch and criticize. Exactly. And one thing about having festivals and book expos, is important that we as authors start these ourselves, because again, if we don't take the initiative to do that, then who will do that? Who would take the hand and say, well, we'll start a book club, we'll start a book expo with you? So we have to do it ourselves as authors.
And you mentioned the idea of a book club, which is a very important part of this whole process of writing and selling, the book clubs, because they promote readers on their level as well. Do you go to book clubs?
I would like to. Right now I'm concentrating mainly on libraries and reaching out. For me, I think for my second book, I'm kind of getting my confidence up, and for me it was, I know what I can offer people right now, and that's encouragement, that if I did it, just about anyone can do it.
And with in the city, there's one book club that I partnership myself with, now Special Thoughts Reading Group. They attended several writers' corners meetings before, and in fact, my first book signing, there was representative from Special Thoughts, which meant a lot to me, because it showed that they were interested in my book, and not only that, they invited me to go to several of the events. So I was very happy about that. So I try to encourage book clubs, or go to different book clubs as I can, just so I can help new authors also by saying, hey, this book club is interested in you, or this writers' organization, they may be interested in what you have to say. So I try to network with them as well.
Thank you so much for being here. Life is a journey. As you wind down its many paths, take an opportunity to read a book. And when life happens, harvest the pearls. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Margo.